Welcome, guys and girls. This is our April meetup of the Scottish Powershell Devops user group. We've only got a few people on a call tonight. There's actually a couple of other groups in the area that are running tonight. We had our event booked, or the date booked, way back, just after the last event in March. But I know a couple of groups have put their user groups on tonight, so I wasn't expecting great numbers, unfortunately. But yeah, we've got a couple of people on YouTube, we've got a few people on the call itself, so hopefully you can all hear me. Just give me a sound check. Somebody either let me know or drop me a message to let me know that you can hear me.
Yep, that's fine.
Cool. Thanks for that, Ewan. And Veronica, yes, thank you, so you can all hear me. And I just think my headphones have decided to stop working. Give me just a second. Awesome, there we go, back. They've either switched off or they're running out of power. We'll sort that out in a minute. So anyway, so here we are. We'll give a few more people a few more minutes, as we usually do. We usually start about 5 past. Give the stragglers time to come in. As I said, we've got a few people on the call and a few people on YouTube watching just now. So I'd like to put on some music, but you know, we're not allowed to. So music while you wait.
Guess I might as well ask now, Paul. Can you hear me all right?
Hey, was that you, Josh?
Yes. Yep.
I've actually got audio. Give me just a second. I've got the audio come through my speakers rather than my headphones. Something gone badly wrong here. Let me try and sort that. There we go. Yes, so I can hear you, Joss. Dead composer music is okay. It is okay, Ewan, but unfortunately, it's too short notice for me to try and find some dead composer music. I've only got a minute left, so you know, some Bach, some I don't know. That's all I know. Mozart. Nick, I see you joined the call. Welcome. I've seen your name pop up at a couple of previous meetups as well. Okay, guys, well, that's 5 past, so we'll just crack on. The stragglers can pop in when they appear. So, yes, so this is our last online meeting. Excuse me, for people that are on YouTube. We're going to try and stream the next meeting, which will be face to face. So, all of us will be meeting in Glasgow, in Scotland. I'm not sure where all the YouTube people are from, so let me tell you, we're in Scotland, and we'll be meeting face to face in Glasgow as of May. So we've got a meeting on the 30th of May. I will try and stream that to YouTube, but yeah, we'll be face to face. I'm hoping everybody in the call can make that. I think the majority of people at the end of the last meetup, I'd sent out a survey, which again I'll do this meetup. The majority of people said they would be able to attend. There was a couple of people who weren't able to, which is why I'm going to try and continue to stream this to YouTube so that we can get people to attend to. Otherwise, we wouldn't normally be able to. My goal has always been, all along, is to get an Edinburgh group running as well, and that hasn't happened as yet, mainly because there's not been an awful lot of interest from people in Edinburgh, and obviously getting a venue, etc., is going to come after that once we get enough people. So it's just not gained the momentum. So I've tried to keep the Glasgow group as a Scottish group and continue to stream it, as I said, to YouTube. And we've got this online call, so far, to allow people to come in from anywhere, regardless of where they are. So we will just go on with the slide. So we do this every month, and we just have a quick 5-10 minutes before our speakers begin, and this is the details of the group. We've got various different URLs for different things in the group. So we've got a Facebook page, so it's facebook.psdevops.org.scot. YouTube page is the video. This call is actually at call.psdevops.org.scot, and we've got the Slack group as well to get you to you can sign up there. And we've got our Git repo as well. Can't see my screen. Give me a second. Thanks for letting me know, Ewan. I'll just, I can scroll. There we go. And we'll record the call as well. I switched that off earlier, that's the problem. So yes, as I was saying, all these lovely links, you can now see them, I assume, Ewan. You should be able to see the slides. Yep, thank you. Okay, yeah, so as I was saying, we have various URLs. Facebook, video, call, and Slack get you to the right places. See if you remember the big long URLs, just stick them in front of the website name. We've obviously got the Git repo as well. We'll keep all the slides, and if the presenters provide like a slide pack or any code or anything like that, that goes on there as well. Or alternatively, a link to their Git repo with the information in there. And the website obviously is psdevops.org.scot. So there are other groups in the UK. We've got one in Southampton, one in London. The Manchester one, I believe, is going to be, they're going to try and get that up and running again. So that's the details for all of them as well. So the main meetup venue, as I mentioned, the sound is pretty much incomprehensible, extremely laggy. Okay. Is anybody else having any issues with the sound? No? It sounds like it's just you, Fred. We've got Veronique said it's fine. Ewan says it's fine. Nick, yeah, everybody said it's fine. So it sounds like it's at your end, I'm afraid. Hopefully it'll pick up and it'll get better. But it might just be, as I said, it sounds like it's just at your end, unfortunately. But yeah, anyway, so the main meetup venue, this is where it is. So it's the Incremental Group are kindly putting us up, and it's on the 5th floor of the Garment Factory in Glasgow. Now, it's near George Square, so it's really handy for Queen Street Station if you get a train in, or if you work in Glasgow. Central Station's a little bit of a more of a walk away, but it's still there. And then you've got Argyle Street as well as another one close by. I think King Street is another station nearby as well. So I've actually been there a couple of times. I've seen the sort of layout that we can have, depending how many of us there are. There's various meeting rooms and other stuff. So this is where we will be having the meetup as of May. It's a really good venue. We're really, really lucky to have Intermedical Group to offer us a space. So yeah, so that's where we'll be. The right hand picture's the reception. Looks a bit funky with the carpets sort of on the wall. I actually thought it was a carpet shop to begin with, but never mind. And yeah, the left hand one is obviously the lift. But this used to be a big textile factory in Glasgow. They've now renovated it, and it's now offices. And as I said, Incremental Group are on the 5th floor. More details about that as of when we're coming closer to the event. But it will be the 30th of May, so put that in your calendar. If you can't attend, as I said, I will try, and I'm going to just underline try, to put this on YouTube live. We might be able to film it as well while we're doing it, maybe put it on YouTube later on. We'll just have to see. It's all kind of new. We're just going to do what we can, and as the months go on, we might be able to do a bit more. So that's where we'll be in May. So another event that's happening in September is SQL GLA. Now that's Scotland's only free data platform community event, as it says there on the slide. I'm going to possibly submit a talk to this. I encourage any of you to submit a talk to it as well. If you're wanting to go along as well, it's free. And registration opens in June, as it says. And if you're thinking about putting a talk in for it, it does end at the end of this month, so you'll have to be quick. So I was there helping to sort of organise people and get the badges sorted last year, so it was a good event. This year it's a full day. Last year it was a half day, so I'm really looking forward to that coming up. So the agenda for tonight is the usual welcome introductions, and then we've got Josh speaking about don't reinvent the wheel, just realign it. He will tell us all about that very shortly. We've got a break at 8:15, and then at 8:20 we've got the Hitchhiker's Guide to User-Friendly Module Design by Fred, who hopefully will have the audio sorted by that point. And then 9:30 we'll do the usual thank yous, etc. We'll hopefully finish at 9:30. Might finish a little bit before, a little bit after. So that's a rough time. Just to jump back actually to the previous slides, about in May, we'll actually be meeting at 6 o'clock in May. I'm fairly certain it's 6 p.m. I'm just going to double check that. So give me just a second. Yes, it's 6 p.m. That's when we'll be meeting. So we normally meet 7 p.m. online, but because we're meeting face to face, it'll be 6. That's what's happening tonight. If you want to give a talk, and it can be 10 minutes, it can be 30 minutes, or it can be an hour, whatever you feel comfortable with. It can be talking about something you've done at work or something you've done at home on your own. Just something you've done with PowerShell. As long as it involves PowerShell or DevOps, we're happy to hear. It doesn't have to be world-class speakers as we've got tonight. It doesn't have to be about the latest and greatest technology. It doesn't have to be the most wonderful thing that nobody's ever heard of before, and you're the first person and it's new. And it can just be about something that you've done at work that's made things a bit easier, either in your job, someone else's job, or something, as I said, you've done on your own. You're maybe working on a module that you want to write for yourself, something that you do needs a bit of code around about it. If you want to come and talk to us about that, please just let me know. Really, really keen to have people who A, haven't spoke before, and B, are just wanting to speak for a very short period of time and maybe just get used to it and see how they quite like it. I've only done a few talks before. I actually love doing it. I find actually being able to share knowledge is fantastic. And I'm really excited for it. So hopefully you'll maybe get the bug that I got. As I said, I'm looking at maybe putting in a talk for SQL GLA. I've got another couple of talks coming up. I'm off to Germany, SQL Grill in Germany in June. And there's another couple of talks that I'm putting forward for as well. More details about that when it comes up. But, I may be able to... that whole road that I've started down is actually picking up some momentum, and I really enjoy it. So please just let me know. And that's the slides. That's us all done for just now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn you over to Josh, who, as I said, is going to talk to us about don't reinvent the wheel, just realign it. And Josh, I shall make you a presenter and you can do your own thing. There you go. You should get a box popping up on the screen and letting you do what you need to do. Yep, we've got that on the screen. I'm just going to put it on my screen so that YouTube can see it. So over to you. It's all yours. Yeah, that's fine. I will do. I shall. I can hear audio. There's no audio from you. If you speak just now, Josh, let's hear if you. I can hear you through YouTube because I'm listening to that as well. Yeah, I don't think there's any. Okay, if you know, you keep going, Josh. I will sort at this end. It will be at my end.
Creating a new PowerShell module when there's one already out there. Work. But a couple of my examples are my personal projects, which I've wasted a ton of time on. So this I'd normally call code time or demos, but for today, it's going to be story time. So if I jump over, that's not my browser. So there's nothing really to demo for using someone else's module instead of building your own, because it'd take way too long. What I wanted to do here is talk through probably the biggest hurdle in using someone else's modules, and that's finding them and realizing that they exist. So one of the first things you probably do is jump over to the PowerShell gallery. I'm assuming everyone on this call knows about the gallery.
Welcome to the conferencing service.
And if you're looking for a module for a specific tool, jump up to the search and type it in. For me, I use Veeam at work quite a lot. And if I search for Veeam, you'll actually find there's 5 things on there. Potentially, one of these might be something I'm looking for. The next step would be jump over to GitHub, because chances are somebody's worked on something but hasn't uploaded it to the gallery. So again, just search for the product you're looking for. And then on the left-hand side, filter by languages, and as you can see, there's 71 repos that are coming up, Veeam and tagged as PowerShell. And there's a lot more here than there are in the gallery. So that's just really quickly modules. I did want to cover that because that's a big thing. If you do find something on GitHub that you use, but it's not quite working how you like, or there's a bug, do jump in there and fire through issues or even contribute your own code. I'm sure most maintainers would really appreciate it. I certainly do. Yeah, and by doing that, like I say, everybody benefits from it, because you get the code working how you want it, the maintainer gets improvements on their code, and everybody else that's using it downstream gets it as well. Now for some actual code. So the next topic was, well, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but the next one was using APIs instead of web scraping. So I ran into an issue at work where I wanted some data out of our payroll system. And I had two options initially. One was
using APIs instead of web scraping.
Get access to a web interface and pull information from it
and try and manipulate it and do all sorts of stuff.
Two options.
The other option was get our HR advisor to generate a CSV file for me, send it through, and I was going to have to build up all sorts of tooling to keep an eye on an inbox or a file share, make sure that the file's new and all of that sort of guff. And it relied on the HR advisor remembering to actually generate that CSV file. I ended up finding out that our our payroll provider had an API that they don't advertise to anyone, and it took them about 2 hours to set it up, and I was away laughing with some easy access to JSON data, which basically sped up what was going to be a week or 2 week project into half a day. So the reason I tell you that is I'm a big proponent of APIs now. And the main thing about them is you probably just have to ask. If you've got a technical contact for one of your suppliers and you're not sure if they've got an API, just ask. The worst case scenario, they say no and you carry on. Or they might charge you for an hour or two's worth of development time to create an API for you. I wanted to show APIs working. But first, here's an example of web scraping. So this is trying to get the definition of programming off of the Oxford Dictionary's website. So I'm using invoke web request to grab the HTML from that page, and then I've found out through inspecting the elements on that page that the definitions come up in these IND classed span elements or tags. So if I run all of this, so I tested this yesterday, assuming they haven't changed their website, I should get back some results. It is pretty slow, unfortunately. So it isn't very pretty, and what I've found is that it's actually giving me a sub-definition for the second meaning of programming. And looking at the HTML, there's no way for me to filter that out. So in order, if I only wanted the primary definitions for these, I'm going to have to do a whole bunch of extra work to try and figure out what I'm seeing.
and it would probably involve, sorry, I'm just refreshing on, typing on YouTube. I would probably need to do some extra work, which might involve looking at the context around it, and it would be a whole lot of work. And also, if they make any changes to their web page, this blows up and doesn't work anymore. So the reason I'm using Oxford Dictionaries is because they have an API. To get access to this, you just have to submit a form saying what you're going to do with it, blah, 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 and they give you an ID and a key, which I've hidden away on my profile so I don't actually accidentally leak it. And we're just hitting an API address with the headers containing my ID and key. And when I get those back, I can drill right down to the definitions in the JSON output that I get back, using invoke REST methods so that it comes through properly. What you see is that I only get the two definitions that I'm after. Now, in theory, this should be a lot more resilient to changes because they're actively, trying not to make breaking changes to their APIs. But also it's a lot more discoverable. Finding the definitions here was a case of seeing the JSON output come through and just logically following the structure, whereas web scraping, I had to dig into the HTML. It wasn't very clear. When I found IND, I didn't know where that would be used on the page, but it was really the only unique characteristic about the definitions, which was a real pain. So I guess my main takeaway from APIs is just ask. In my case, yeah, they charged us, I won't give exact amounts because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, but they charged a couple of $100 for a few hours of development time. But the path I was going to go down would have ended up costing the company a lot more and lost time from me, which nobody would have been happy about. So the next thing, and one of the biggest things, is libraries. So I've got a bit of a story to talk through with this one. Luckily, I've actually got something to show on the screen for this one. So I maintain a project called Burnt Toast. It's about, as you can see, about 3 years ago. It still supported Windows 10 and Windows 8. And basically, looking at my old folder structure here is giving me a bit of a nervous breakdown. But what it would do back here is it was working with, sorry, let me actually find it, working with actual XML data. So you can see I'm working on a template, which is basically an XML document. Sorry, I'll blow that up a bit just in case it's too small on the screen there. And I was working with nodes and adding child nodes and doing all sorts of stuff. And that worked when it was Windows 8, and it was all based off of a very simple template. Then Windows 10 rolled around, or rather, one of the feature updates for Windows 10 rolled around, and they moved to, rather than template-based toast notifications, they moved to adaptive toast notifications. So I made the decision, all right, I'm going to start using only supporting Windows 10 and only using these adaptive toast notifications, which aren't backwards compatible with Windows 8. So I ended up, after about 6 months to a year's worth of fluffing around, starting to use Windows PowerShell 5 classes. So you can see in here I'm using enums. I defined a class for audio with a whole bunch of properties, and it took me months, literally, to get this structure of working all the way through to feature parity with the old method of doing things through the XML templates. And as you can see, at the end of the day, these classes, and I guess the exact way these classes working aren't that important. It's more the journey. But as you can see, these classes ended up just outputting XML at the end of the day. So it ended up being a way of generating that XML data. And then firing that through to Windows to display the toast notification. So as you can see, there's a lot in this file. And like I say, it was a lot of work. And then I made the discovery that there's this thing called the UWP toolkit, which is a NuGet package, which basically did everything I was trying to do, but better, and was reasonably well documented. So my commit there was switching to the UWP toolkit, and the reason why I picked out this specific commit was that comment that I made there 2 years ago, which somewhat influenced the name of this talk. So at the end of 6 months or so work, I found this thing and it basically just worked. So to cut to the chase a little bit, I ended up throwing the DLL for the UWP toolkit into my module. And I ended up importing that library, which meant in my code, and this was very early on, so it wasn't completely working yet, but hopefully, yeah. No, this was before I ended up getting everything working. So I'll show you how it looks now. Public, look at text as an example. So now you can see I'm defining output types using the UWP toolkit. So text now isn't a string, it's adaptive text. And I'm using that class everywhere. And it just, instead of taking months, I think once I found it, I had the new version out in 3 weeks. Yeah, it was a very rapid turnaround. So I guess the question then, once you've identified, and again, like modules, you've got to go out there and find the thing. You can go over to nuget.org and search around. You might find something there, or Google, whatever, you'll find something. But I guess the question is, how do you actually use it in PowerShell? Because as you saw, that was a DLL file. So what I do is, once I've found it on NuGet, there's a button here for manual download. And this is pretty small, so it should be really quick. So NuGet file is basically a container, and you can extract it with whatever tool you use. And inside it, you'll find a lib folder and then DLLs. So I've already copied these DLLs to my C drive here, and I've got a bit of a demo to show using them. Now, as far as using the contents of a DLL, if you've ever done any .NET type work, it's going to look very similar. So this is the .NET-ish way of creating a GUID. We run it, we get a GUID, interestingly, the output of that is exactly the same as new GUID, except that there's a lot less overhead doing it the .NET way. But in order to use a external DLL, you need to go ahead and use add type and point the path at the DLL. So if we run that, you won't see any output, but now we can do things like creating a new object, and this is coming out of that DLL file. So, and it's just using the new constructor on the end. You can see this looks a lot similar to that. We run it, we get a text object, and then we can start using that object like any other object, give it some properties. If we look at it again, you can see that we've updated all of those properties on that object. And the object itself, pipe to get member, you can see that it belongs to that UWP toolkit, all the properties and all the methods on it. So one of the biggest hurdles is finding out what those properties are, what this string here is to actually use the thing, because sometimes it doesn't match up with the name of the DLL, which doesn't help. Yeah, what the methods are, what the properties are. So you've got two main options there. One, and there's a bit of a spoiler up there if you're following along the tags, but one is if it's an open source project, you can probably just hit up the GitHub or wherever the code happens to be stored and go and have a look for yourself. So, although it's not 100%, where are we? Toast text. So I've found the comments in Microsoft's package here to be quite good at times. This one here, unfortunately, doesn't have many comments on it, but it does tell me all the properties. And what the main thing to look for here is, I'm looking in the wrong folder. Sorry. But the main thing to look for is the namespace, and that will tell you what the start of this string here is. Once you get to that point, generally VS Code gets pretty good about giving you IntelliSense. Unfortunately, before that point, unless it's been typed previously, IntelliSense doesn't always pull through for you.
You've got a typo.
Oh, good catch. There we go. So once you get to the end of notifications, your IntelliSense comes through and it starts being a lot easier to work with. So finding that class, the class name helps. And as you can see, it's pulling through the methods, all that. Once you've got to that stage, it's generally pretty easy to find your way through, as long as you can create the object. And of course, I didn't look at what the constructor actually needed for bindable strings, so that's my bad. It was probably telling me there. Yeah. Yeah. So once you can create an object, it's just a matter of piping it through to get member and seeing all the bits that belong to it. The other option, which I find a bit more helpful, is .peak from JetBrains. I think it used to be, it had a different name a while ago, I think, but .peak from JetBrains. And I forgot to open this, so you can see it all work from the start. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to decompile the DLL and effectively just show you the contents once it loads. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to decompile the and it's already open there, but it's just a matter of going file open, pointing at the DLL. So as you can see up there, I've got that Microsoft.toolkit.uwp.notifications loaded. Open there, but it's just a matter of, and under there I can find my adaptive text. So in this case, I know that anything at this layer under here, I can just put a dot and then reference adaptive text. And if I look under there, whoa, scrolling way too fast, sorry. I can see all of the properties. And I can see somewhere, can generally see the constructors. And I haven't used JetBrains too much, but if you double click on the class, it'll start decompiling. And now, well, I think it actually downloads it, but whatever. And then you can actually see everything. I know, I've clicked on the wrong one again. Sorry about that. This one doesn't actually. Anyway, so I've run through this a bit quicker than I had expected to. So sorry about that. So I guess the takeaways from this, from my perspective, is as much as possible, use existing tools. This allows you to focus on the specifics of your situation and the specific implementations for your environment and your domain and your exchange and your file systems, rather than the time-consuming foundations, because chances are the foundations have already been built by someone and you just need to point them towards your issue. A big one for me is contribute back to the community. So if you're using a module or you're using someone else's code, you find an issue with it, you have a question, just go and ask the maintainer. They'll 9 times out of 10 be willing to have a chat with you or accept any suggestions, or even better, if you've got code you can contribute back, fire it through in a pull request. And the tagline for all of this is, be the time-efficient tool-building hero your organization needs, not a speed bump. So thank you guys. The slide deck's at that bit.ly link there. The code will be eventually as well, later on today once I've had a coffee. And I guess if you've got any questions, fire them through and I'll do my best.
Josh, has anybody got any
questions? Thanks very
questions?
much for getting up so early to do this presentation for us. I doffed my cap to you. There's no way I could do that.
Well, I used to get up at 3 AM to do some live streams, so it's known territory.
At 3
I put a
AM?
link into the chat there. There's I don't know if you've come across Get Constructor.
I was looking for that when I was putting this together, and I just couldn't get, my Google foo was failing me.
So and I'd not seen the tips about Visual Studio Code, and I'll definitely get more reason for me to use Visual Studio Code. But Get Constructor's really good. There's a couple of different versions, and I think Jeff Snover put out one, and there's another one that I put there in the chat, and maybe Fred's got something to say on it. But that's great because you just add in the type, and then it just shows you the different constructors. And depending on, I'm not sure how it works with what's behind it, but sometimes you can just add a hash table into it with the name of the fields that you're passing in, and that's it. It's all one liner, or you need to do new object. And I just think that's I'm not sure how it works.
Luckily for me, using that toolkit, the documentation's been really good. So it's been just a matter of, reading through that and knowing exactly what I need to chuck in to get it working. There's only been a few times where I've had to fire up that .p to actually try and figure things out myself.
But there's definitely a theme, and I don't know what was said at the summit, but definitely Jeff Snover's keynote was all about how we deliver, looking in organizations, how we deliver value, what we do best, rather than, although again, like you say, it's a big struggle for me because the way that I learn about stuff is by doing it, so there has to be a balance somewhere.
Yes, yeah. And luckily, so for me, I managed to have time at home to do that sort of thing. And I know not everyone does, so it is a matter of finding that balance.
Was there any big take homes from the summit?
I guess my big three. So I start work. I've been off work since the summit, and I'm back today. So I'm going to have to shoot off after this and get ready. But the number one thing I'm doing when I get into work today is setting up WebGear for a web-based interface for running commands. And actually, yes, I can pull that up and chuck a link in chat because it's really cool. So this is what I'm going to be standing up at work today to have a go at. So I saw this demoed at Summit, and it basically, so my issue is we've got some technicians at work that don't have privileges to run some of the scripts I need them to be able to run. And I've been looking to ChatOps as a way of doing that because I can expose commands to them through the chat interface. Unfortunately, we use Microsoft Teams, and none of the PowerShell-based chatbots, or a lot of the on-premise chatbots, don't work with Teams yet. But this gives a web interface that does what I wanted to get out of ChatOps. And once the videos go live from the summit, I'd recommend everyone see this demonstration because I heard it talked about. It wasn't until I'd seen it in action that it really clicked for me that it would do what I needed it to do. Shame there's no pictures on here.
That looks really cool. We're also using Teams.
Yeah, Teams is great at what it does. It's just missing some things.
Is there integration coming for it with Flow?
So it's got some Flow integration. The last one I tried didn't. It was marked as preview. Yeah, so there was just a question about the videos from Summit. Yes, all of the main sessions were filmed. And I think they said it could take a month or so to get them edited and up on YouTube.
So maybe we'll see something in the next couple of weeks.
Hopefully.
Because obviously they couldn't get any. They had major issues last year with the.
Yeah, so they had I think that was a outfit called Confreaks or Conference Freaks. So they got in an external firm specifically to do the videoing, and they had someone at the back of each room, operating the cameras. It should be good.
That looks really interesting. I'm a wee
I
bit
did
a wee bit a wee bit nervous around Gia as to how the level of take up that its traction that it's going to get, and investing time and effort in something, and then Microsoft steps away from it.
Yeah. Well, I guess I should mention this is called WebGea, but it doesn't use Gia. It's more
Oh, really? Okay.
the philosophy. Yeah.
Interesting.
So you control all the permissions within this module. It's not leveraging Gia for anything.
Cool. That's definitely. I'll definitely look forward to seeing that.
Yeah. Andrew just made a good point in the YouTube chat, which was that you could present the WebGea site as a tab in Teams, which would actually work, I think. You wouldn't be able to do it in line and chat, but yeah. I'll have to have a play with that today. Thanks, Andrew.
And there was a couple of other points you said from the summit.
Now I always forget these. So one of them's we've been looking for a way of doing like just having a graphical way of seeing our systems and figuring out what relates to what, and if one thing goes down, what's affected. And Warren Frame demoed Neo4j, which is a graph database, and he's got a lightweight, very early stages configuration management database that he's called DOTS. So I'm going to have a play with that, because again, as soon as I saw the demo on screen of it working live, I went, that's what we've been looking for. And again, that's another one, another session I'd really recommend seeing once it's live. And the final thing for me was Puppet. Need to start playing with Puppet. Yeah, those were the three biggies for me. Obviously, I made a lot of notes, but those are the top of the list.
Andrew's made a comment in the chat on YouTube
That's
again.
great, thanks for that. And from at the PSConf EU, there seemed to be an awful lot more of a focus this year on, and more of a sense of momentum behind DSC.
Yeah. And that was something that surprised me about Puppet, was it handles the inclusion of DSC pretty well. So you can leverage both, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's been a architectural change with DSC in that I think Microsoft are now saying that the actual full push server side, they're kind of saying that Chef, Ansible, and Puppet all handle that side of the things much better, and so they're actually opening it up so that they can work together.
Mm. Yeah, and that'll be really good.
They seem to be concentrating a lot on Chef, Puppet, and Ansible using DSC resources, as opposed to DSC being able to do all the bits and pieces itself. Fred just said Ben Gallen's had a great presentation on the pool server. I assume that was at the PS conference in Germany.
Yes.
And Andrew's just put in the chat, Josh, about chat ops. I think it's ISH or LSH hashtag. I don't know if that's a Twitter hashtag we're looking at.
Oh, he's chat ops-ish.
Ah, right, okay. I wasn't sure if it was that or if it was something else.
No, he's he's got a good idea there that I'm really going to have to try.
Cool. So you're taking something away from here, us as well. So that's great. Okay, guys, does anybody else get any questions for Josh? No? Okay. Well, Josh, thank you very much for your presentation. And
Thank you for having me.
no, it's been great. And so apologies for the audio issues on YouTube earlier. We managed to get them sorted. But yeah, as Ewan says, it's a thought-provoking talk. So it's something I've never actually done as yet, was to start using DLLs for stuff and the other bits you were doing. So yeah, it's something I've been wanting to do. As you said, why reinvent it? Why we're writing all this PowerShell code when there's probably DLLs out there for stuff that we could just call on rather than.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Awesome.
Well, guys.
Well,
sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Assuming there's no more questions, I'll go get ready for work.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, everyone, and reach out on Twitter if you've got any other questions, and I'll do my best to get back to you quickly.
Just before you go, Andrew has said that he's got some ideas about potentially incorporating Universal Dashboard into the mix, and he'll DM you. And he said, "Great presentation." So.
Yeah, I think he's got some very good ideas there.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you again, Josh, and enjoy
Awesome.
work.
Yep. Thank you.
Cheers.
Have a good day. Well, I guess have a good night, everyone.
Yes. Yes. Guys, we're going to take a 5-minute break here.
Have a good tomorrow.
Will do.
We're going to take a 5-minute break just now, guys, before Fred comes on, and so you can grab a drink, and we'll see you back in a couple of minutes. Hi, Fred. Were you testing the audio there?
Don't understand a word right now. Do you understand me?
Your audio is. I'll type it in the chat actually.
Can you type that, please? Now better? Still too loud or still too muffled? Sounds that sounds a bit like what I've been hearing on the internet. Alright, did it improve just now or same as before? Alright, in that case, welcome to from what you describe as about as bad as what I heard.
We're just trying to sort the sound out for Fred's presentation at the moment, so if you give us a few minutes, guys, we'll hopefully get that sorted. As you can hear, his audio is very muffled. We think it's a sort of location issue from where he is. No, I haven't got a mechanical keyboard. I have what have I got? A Logitech wireless, an 810 or something. Very, very little small keys. Not small keys. Low keys. I have a couple of mechanical keyboards and I just cannot get used to them when I'm coding. Fred is currently trying a GoToMeeting. So we're going to have to see if that will work. We've not had any problems with GoToMeeting in the past. Hold on a wee second. Yeah, nobody's ever complained about the audio before. Well, there are a few little issues, but not as bad as that. So I'm hoping it's just a one-off, and I'm hoping GoToMeeting works. We can see that. I will also stream the GoToMeeting to YouTube. But if you give us a second, we're just going to try this, make sure it works, and then we'll share it with everybody else. We're still behind. No, sorry, behind. We're still ahead of where we should be. Fred's talk wasn't due to start until 20 past 8, and we're at 8 minutes past just now, so we're 12 minutes ahead. There's actually, just going back to Josh's talk, there's actually, I don't know if anybody uses I think it's ps-get and posh-get on the command line to kind of show them what their get status is of the repo that they're in. Both of them cause me problems. And I know that using the get DLL that comes with the get, sorry, I'm kind of looking at something. The get DLL that comes with the get client, I think they both use that. So that's something I was going to actually look at. So I'm glad Josh has shown us that talk, because that way that gives me a start for 10 almost.
So there's the donut thing on the left of free conference call, and then there's preferences where you can tweak around with the echo cancellation and the gain settings. I don't know if that's having any impact.
I have
never,
never,
I guess.
Yeah, I've never touched any of them. It's always just worked, obviously.
I'm a bit confused about what I'm doing wrong, because I've got the splash screen, but it's not showing me video anymore in free conference call, although I guess maybe it's slightly academic right now. Oh, now it's coming up.
Yeah, I've just clicked share. Sorry, when Josh disappeared, I didn't click share again.
Right.
Just to share the...
Hi, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes, and the audio is almost perfect. So,
That sounds great.
So what I'll do is I'll share that link with everybody else on the call. I think you just sent it to me. And they can all join. Guys, I'm going to send you or share a link. And if I can copy it. There we go. Oh, Fred's beat me to it. If you jump onto that link, you'll be able to see Fred's presentation. And I'm going to share that with YouTube. And I'm also hoping that the desktop audio will come through on that as well. Suddenly the audio now sounds like we're in a bus station.
Hello. Can you hear me loud and clearly now?
Yeah, yes, I can.
Excellent. Now I no longer hear as if you were speaking with your head in the water.
I think
All
Nick's
right.
still to join
Everybody
us
here
on
already?
I think Nick, we're just waiting on Nick.
Can we get started, or is anybody still missing?
Yeah, we're waiting on Nick. Nick, are you going to join us? Oh, he's just joining now. Give him
a conspiracy of silence going on here.
It's all good.
It's good. We're just waiting on Nick, and he's just about to join, and that's us all here.
Ah, excellent.
And I think YouTube, it's all loud and clear on that as well. He's just joining now. Give him
a conspiracy Great. Of silence. In that case, you've got everything covered.
Let's go.
All right. Welcome to my presentation on the Hitchhiker's Guide to User-Friendly Module Design. First of all, don't panic. I know this is a difficult topic, but we'll cover it. First of all, I'm Fred. I'm doing funky stuff with PowerShell mostly. I work at a DBA tools project and maintain a few modules of myself. And PowerShell is pretty much my single largest hobby at all. I currently work as a freelance consultant for PowerShell, mostly teaching. And this is one of the main pain points I've seen again and again and again. How often have you touched a module and wondered what the hell this module was supposed to do? Found some legacy stuff from your predecessor, inherited it? Yeah. I think I'll need to rewrite that again. That doesn't look good. Or something that was just hideously to use. Well, let's see how we can avoid this in our own code. So, first of all, let's talk about identity. A module has a bit of an identity, and the identity is critical because if the user doesn't have an idea what he's supposed to do with the module, how the module can help him, he's not really going to use it. For example, let's talk about Pester. Everybody of us has heard about Pester, I hope. The thing about Pester is, what's the name supposed to mean? I mean, Pester, what function? Well, by now, Pester is pretty much synonymous to tests in the PowerShell world. The thing here is, somebody packed lots of functionality into a module. And the entire module has a single purpose, tests. There's a single technical benefit Pester brings you. It has multiple resources, most of it are functions, but a module can have a lot more resources than just functions. Tab completion, key bindings. One of the most used PowerShell module out there doesn't have a single function in it. It's called PS Realign. It provides a lot of resources, a lot of functionality, very little of that commands, nothing of that functions. That kind of differentiation is need to have in mind because user friendliness comes from more than just having the right command for the right time. Now, there is another scenario for the module identity, and that is when a module has more than one component. When a module tries to solve a strategic idea, a concept, that provides more than one use case, more than one benefit. For example, my module, the PS framework. The entire concept is about providing an infrastructure, a framework for PowerShell scripts and modules. At that point, there is no graspable technical benefit you can attach to it. A framework, but what does it? What does it help me? And that's where components come in. Either you have the Pester set up with one functionality for everything. My module does tests. It's a very specific graspable use case. Or in this instance, you need to have clearly defined components, benefits they provide. For example, the PS framework provides logging. Logging is a very specific use case. There's a technical benefit users can understand. So when I advertise my PS Framework module, I tell them about this is for have you ever told you about the logging component of the PS Framework? Or have I ever told you about the configuration system of the PS Framework? Or have I ever about the managed run spaces feature? There are a lot of individual components, and that's how you need to shape the narrative. If you just have a bag of resources that aren't clearly structured, people will be looking at your module, if they even find it, which is unlikely, and scratch their head and wonder, now what am I? Nah, no time for this now. I'll look at it later. That was one of my beginner mistakes about my modules, advertising it as only the strategic purpose, not the individual functionality, the individual benefits it provides. All right, demo time. Documentation. Our module is only as good as its docs. Anybody ever heard about the term documentation-driven development? DDD?
Yeah.
Excellent idea, but I don't have seen it ever done in action.
Glad to hear it.
The good documentation pane. So let's look at it. Now, individual command help is obviously going to be needed, but we're looking about module design, not function design. So we just created a component. And the first thing I want to see in a module really is concept help, an about article. For example, you can run, this is one of the, this is one of the most commonly retrieved help article that I ever read. Is about regular expressions, because I can never remember just what special character meant what. There's so many options in regex, and this is a concept article that explains the concept about one functionality. Now, every module needs to have that, in my opinion. One that explains the benefit the module brings the user. Easy ways to get started. What's happening there in this module? Put it there, and that's, in my opinion, a lot more important, a web link. Good documentation is not necessarily within the code. If you've got a website, and there are easy ways to do that, if you have a website, then users can read up on your module while they're on the train browsing with their iPad. They are not, if you only have comment-based help and some concept articles, they can only ever read up on it when they're in the console, and when they're sitting at the console, they usually don't have the time to actually manage that. Now, the great part about GitHub, in my opinion, is that it has a system that allows you to publish a website using GitHub. In which you basically just place MD files, and GitHub will automatically convert that into a properly looking website. Let's take a look at what the index file of my project's website looks like. Basic markdown syntax. And let's see what that looks like in action. This is one and the same page. You can easily maintain it in GitHub. You can have other contributors pull requests and fix your typos. Yeah, numerous typos. I'm absolutely not talking from personal experience here. No, not at all. Anyway, that allows you very easily to maintain documentation in a user-friendly way. And if you're using Platypus, anybody ever heard about Platypus?
For documentation of my modules.
Exactly. What I have is a command reference for every single command in all of my modules, and it is part of my build action in my Visual Studio team services, where it will update the command reference on every single build. So all of my documentation, all of my comment-based help and all the functions is automatically also available on the website. And at the same time, with that, searchable by Google and all the other features that provides.
And that's all driven by Platypus.
And it's all driven by Platypus. I've got a build script that in the background builds these indexes, and every single file you see here, every single documentation on every single command, this is literally the comment-based help of my commands, read by Platypus and published to the GitHub repository that GitHub uses to build this website. Now, having good tutorials is a nice thing to have. I really recommend investing the time from quick start guides to full complex documentation on everything, but not every user, every human being learns well by reading an overladen documentation and website. Actually, videos have a significant impact on on giving an impression of what your module is doing, what benefits it provides. It is very, very more graspable than any plain documentation file like this will ever cause. So I can only recommend invest the time in learning the tools to create videos, video guides on YouTube, create your own channel for your module, and it will be a lot easier for newcomers to understand what your module is about, what benefit it gets them, with a significantly lower entry barrier, because they'll fairly, in a few minutes, be able to understand what benefit the module provides them. Right. Now back to PowerPoint. I love it when my script tells me what to do.
Fred, do you find that there's a big overhead to updating those videos, keeping it up to date with changes in your code? Because, you know, from a work perspective, if I was going to suggest it to work, because we have, you know, a dedicated media team, but it's like, how much? Because we barely struggle to keep our paper documentation up to date. Never mind then the overhead of going and updating videos as well.
Actually, I very much believe this works very well, because the main thing about the video guides is you do not try to convey complex documentation. If this is not really a record of current fact, what I only would recommend it for is introductory guides, getting people fixed with your module. Like, this is a quick start, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. When I recorded this video, which is a 2 minutes video, I spent 6 hours learning the tools, which is a one-time cost, actually. Spent 1 hour getting the frame around it all right, and 10 minutes doing the individual recording. So for an update, if something changes and I need to record that update, make an update to that video, it would be like 15 minutes. Because everything else is already in place. And at that point, yes, I very much think it's worth it. I do not think it is a good idea to like convert your entire documentation into a video-based documentation, because that is a lot of more overhead. But bearing that for short guides on how to handle something, yes, I think it's worth it. I have created so far a single video, because it was right before the conference and I needed something for the presentation, because like preaching, do that, and not having done that myself would be a bit hypocritical. It's, from that perspective, for me, it's worth it. I have been at a few customers, which is where I got the idea actually, or the impact of why it's so important, who have a lot of these guides, and the 2 customers that had that had a significantly higher adoption rate for their tools. I think for an open source project, it's nice. I recommend it if you can do it. Admittedly, I think the online website is more important because you need to have one source of truth for documentation. I think the website is the correct place for that. The video is definitely an update to that. I think it's worth it. All right. Now let's look at the command prefix. The prefix are the first few letters of a noun that are common across an entire module, like for the Active Directory module, AD. General advice, keep it short and sweet. Ideally 3 letters or less. If you can't do it otherwise 4, but that is pretty much limit because that is something every single user has to type again and again and again. Now, if you do not have a command prefix, my favorite sinner is the get user command. If you run find module by a command, because we've seen an online guide where some command was used, and you get 7 modules returned. Now, which module was going to provide that benefit? Yeah, not really helpful. Also, it is very often used in finding commands, actually using the get command, cmdelete, which I highly recommend as the probably most often used command for me ever. A lot more performant and flexible than get help, by the way. Now, anybody of you knew that there's a way to set a default command prefix for a module in the manifest using the default command prefix point?
Yeah.
I've seen it a few times. It's bad. Don't use it. First of all, find module doesn't find it. You need to search for the commands without the default prefix. Other automation mechanisms don't support it either. By the way, Pesto has some very fun idiosyncrasies if you try to mock them. And after the fact, users just don't use them. They are not aware of that. It's a problem. I've seen a few people do this, like, the default prefix for my module is the full name of the product it is for, and everybody is free to use a short name for that. It just won't happen. People will curse about you because you have this insanely long prefix. Yeah. Now, tab completion. I love tab completion. Tab completion is what saves me from all this internal creating of typos because I can't type straight. Always fails me. Now, first of all, validate set. If you tell PowerShell for a parameter what is a legal input, it will know that this is legal and will provide help for that. Very convenient, nice in a script, useful. All right, let's import the beer factory module. Ah, damn, all beer has been drunk. So let's create a new beer, and we need a beer in a specific container, and there are a few options for that. Let's see how that works. In this instance, the container parameter is of a type beer factory container. And that beer factory container is an enum, an enumeration, which is the C# way of telling PowerShell a set of options. Both of these serve to provide tab completion, and that PowerShell knows what will be legal options for this. However, both of them have some severe limitations because basically you have to tell PowerShell at the time you write the code what will be the legal options. There is no dynamic content involved in this. And sometimes we want some more dynamic, we want to decide at runtime what is legal or what is not legal. One of the ways you can go about that is creating a dynamic parameter that creates this validate set at runtime. This allows you to specify a set of legal options at a time the command is executed. This is useful, but it is fraught with dangers. I used it myself, and I must admit I'm a sinner in this. I've used them for quite some time for exactly this feature. The problem here is twofold. One, dynamic parameters suck from a get help perspective, because in many get help sets, they do not provide any help for the parameter. And the second part is if something in your dynamic param goes wrong, the user doesn't get an exception about execution error or something like that. What he receives is a parameter not known exception. As you might imagine, this is going to confuse him. And most likely he will be asking Google for the next solution, not you for a fix, because he won't know about that, and because he's grumpy, and because you're just right now in a meeting and not available. Yes. So what we're going to do instead is create custom tab completion. Now there's a module called Tab Expansion++ that allows you to create a fairly complex script block and assign properties, run logic at a time, and provide defaults, with the user having the ability to specify other values. Been using that a lot. And in PowerShell 5 onwards, it's out of the box included. However, this isn't really nice to use. So what I did was in the PS Framework module, create a system to provide simple tab completion. The first thing we need is we need to specify a script block that we register. In this case, we first receive the module information of the Beer Factory module, which we already have loaded. Let's try this out. Version 1. And then we invoke in the module scope this script block. This allows us to execute code within a module. And what we do is we select the brand of all beers included, and only once per brand. Run. And now we registered this named script block to the parameter brand of the get beer command. Get beer brand, not beer, thank you very much. Brand. Didn't work. Well, right, we need to first create a few beers. So that it's an Hofbräu, and a Heineken. And now I've got tab completion for exactly those. The neat solution about these custom script blocks, beyond that you can easily do it at runtime, is that you can attach this to commands you do not control. Validate sets, enumerations, dynamic params only works for commands you control because you have to edit the code. This system allows you, for example, to teach connect VI server the usual name of hosts you want to connect to. Or you could specify the usual computer names you need to list in Active Directory. Which allows you to very easily specify whatever your daily needs are, make it easier, more convenient, your entire console life. Of course, in a module, you should provide tab completion wherever valid for your commands, because people like using the tab option and not having to figure out what happened or not. All right, let's take a look at the command naming. The main focus here is they should be easy to find and use. Get command. Just think about get command. If you can find the command with that intuitively, you're golden. The command's name should reflect what the user is trying to do. Just think about user perspective, not the actual logic that is executed. There is one legendary example where this went wrong. It has poisoned a major module. The reputation was tarred in the entire community. And it still is tarred. It is the whipping boy of in the entire PowerShell world, or one of them at least, one of the serious ones. Anybody ever used that command?
I've used it.
Did you load the module and found it, or did you read up a documentation on how to use it?
No, I think I actually used another command and it told me to add that in, I think.
Okay. Yes. What happened here is that the Azure module, when you log, what this actually is, really, it should have been named Connect Azure. This is the connect command. What happens in the background, you add an account cookie on the server side that represents your connection, which is why they made it add. Now, this command has a bit of a more of a history at that point, because there's one nice community member known as Joel Bennett, or J. Cole, who thought this was kind of stupid and decided to fix it. He created a pull request, renamed the command, renamed all references everywhere in the entire code base, which was pretty prevalent. Then he added a second pull request for it and did the same thing for the entire documentation side of the Azure module. This is a massive amount of data and effort, and submitted both of them at the same time. Yeah. And then the Azure team rejected the pull request because it was working as designed. Keep that lesson in mind, please. Do not repeat this. You will be mocked for decades, because by now they did rename it, but I will still drag out that exact example every single time.
Is that another point about why you should discuss things first with the maintainers?
That as well, before you start performing changes, yes, you should discuss major changes, major effort. You should discuss them with the maintainers, because if you spend several days on work and just to get it rejected because it's not within the design scope, that's kind of bad, kind of frustrating as well. I must admit, in this instance, even I was greatly surprised that happened, that they rejected it, because it wasn't exactly after 1 year. It had time to pervade the community and gather a lot of scorn. We are right now, I'm working on a debatos project, and if I want to dissuade Chrissy, my boss, project leader, from doing something, I tell her this is something the Azure module team would do. It will work every single time. I don't need to offer any technical details. I only have to tell her this is what the Azure team would be doing.
So kind of the opposite of what would Jesus do?
Yeah, something like that. I try to step down on Satan references, but the number 666 might appear occasionally.
Very good.
All right. Now, commands should usually be using verbs, and they should reflect the action it's supposed to be taking. Not every command uses verbs. For example, Pesta has quite a few commands that don't. It should, because it's a special syntax. Also, if you're mapping a specific kind of language, for example, there's a module out there that maps the HTML standard that has functions like H2 or P. But unless you're doing something like that, please, please, please use verbs. They should reflect what you're going to do, and they should be approved verbs, because otherwise the user will get this nice yellow warning: this module is using unapproved verbs. Please fix this. Nasty. There's an official documentation on that. See the links below, with some description of what actually each verb means, because there are a few points of confusion I see coming up again and again. For example, the difference between set and update. But that is a science by itself, and in my opinion, one of the best evidences that naming is hard. With that out of the way, you won't be getting around nouns, and there is one thing I must ask of you, all of you. Don't use German naming. Just because Donau-Dampfschifffahrtsgesellschaftskapitänskajüte is a legal word in German, you shouldn't be naming your commands like that. Yes, this is a noun from the Intel Network Adapter module. 47 characters in case you're slow with the counting. Don't do that. Should have been something like set inet adapter with a parameter for maximum bandwidth percentage. If you need to have really complex or granular commands for whatever reason, odds are your module has reached a complexity where you should be splitting it off into separate modules with a new prefix and shorter names. They always should be singular, and they should always include the name of the object it's working with, because that's what most users will be using with get command when they're searching for things. All right. Now, personally, I like cheating. The old saying, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough, comes into mind. And there is one way to cheat at command naming. This is so important for me that I literally wrote down the entire thing on the slide, which you'll be seeing soon. Basically, ask somebody that is familiar with the technology, but not with your module, and then tell him to search for the command. If he can't find it within a few minutes, your command needs a new name. All right. Let's take a look at the configuration part. A module can have settings. One of the most renowned modules for this is the PS Realign module, because the most of the benefits the PS Realign generates is not actually from the commands it has, but from how it ties into your console experience. And if you don't have a command, you can't offer parameters. So what PS Realign did was it provides options. Lots and lots and lots and lots of options, which you can specify with ZPS Realign options. And there are quite a few parameter options available. Have fun digging through that. All right. First of all, you could store options like that in memory simply by declaring a module variable, that is the script scope within your module, and providing two commands to change that. Setconfig in this example and getConfig. And now we could simply set a value and retrieve it again. And this is a very simple way to actually just store settings in a way the user can update whenever he wants. Problem here is we have absolutely no persistence. There's no file, there's no nothing, which means the user is forced to, if he wants to have the settings persist, he has to place them in his profile. And if he places them in his profile, the module will automatically import it on every console start, even if you do not plan on using the module. Not quite convenient, but as you've seen, not very complex to implement, so many people go with that. Joel Bennett, J. Cole, has a configuration module which allows you to store settings in file and then retrieve them. They will be automatically retrieved when the module is imported. Handy, but a bit problematic. Now, I've seen this same thing from the user perspective. I'd like to have like a settings, like an options menu in any application. For example, okay, now Visual Studio Code is not a good example, but for example, PowerPoint, I've got an option set for a configuration for autocorrect, auto format. It's a huge menu. Now, I'd like to have something similar in PowerShell. So I created a configuration system in the PS Framework module. Note that I point at the component I offer, which has a command called setpsfconfig that accepts a few parameters. Module for the name of the module, the setting value. Let's create the size for the fridge with a default value of 10. This is something internal. a bit complex. It has an input validation of integer, and it has a description, so the user actually knows what the setting will be doing. This is one of the main pain points for me in jQuil's module, because there is no documentation included, so you have to know what a setting means by its name. All right. Now we've got a maximum fridge size of 10. Now, don't get scared about we can only put 10 beers in the fridge or anything like that. We support the container size barrel, which should suffer because it suffers because if you can put 10 barrels of beer into your fridge, I want to have your fridge plus content. For more convenient retrieval in the if in your module, you can use get psfconfig value to just get a value. Now let's update the setting to 3. Only 3 barrels because we've got a small fridge. Let's add a new beer. Then in the background, the code is checking for the value. And if it doesn't work, it creates a beer getting warm exception. Okay, so much for the hard coding part. There is one more thing I really care about, and I've seen lots of modules getting it wrong. No littering. Seriously, no littering. There was this fun module I had that would keep writing files to temp and never clean up behind it. And I was wondering why it was taking longer and longer, because at some point it had 50,000 files in a temp folder, 80,000 files in your temp folder, 100,000 files in temp folder. It was getting actually longer execution time because it needed to find the name that wasn't taken yet. So clean up behind yourself. Temporary files should be removed. Resources you have a handle on, connections you have established, clean them up after you when you no longer need them. Because frankly, somebody might try to use it. There might be throttling limits. You might affect other modules and the user and the overall experience by drawing down performance. Now, there is one thing few people actually do know. You can react to your module being removed using remove module. You can register a simple script block that, in this example, releases a cached session simply by adding that script block to this event on your module. If you place this in your PSM1 file during import, the execution context allows you to directly access the module as it's being imported. At the same time, sometimes your user will just kill the process. Just click on the X or the upper right border and kill the process, in which case this event will not trigger. However, there is an engine event for PowerShell that supports this. So you can also register events to a regular shutdown of your process. The only thing you really can't handle is an entire process crash. Critical system error, you can't handle that, but if you have something like that available, you can push cleanup somewhere where the user doesn't see it and make sure it happens at some point. All right, how are we for time? Yeah.
Yeah, we're good for time.
Excellent. Now, when you create commands, one of the main things I really care about is pipeline. If you've got a get command and a remove command, remove should accept from get. If you've got a set command, it should also accept from get. At the same time, the user should not be forced to run get beer before you can pipe it to set beer. But commands that belong together should have a connection between each other. There should be gets for most kind of objects you're working with. And ideally, you should also accept string, because most people export items to file using a simple text file, so they can get content something. Get content service.txt pipe to get AD computer. will usually work. And in this, again, don't think about the technical implementation, think about what the user will be seeing and assuming. In case it's necessary, internally call the get command in order to make it happen. So let's take a look what we have here. Now let's drink a beer. Yep. Now what's happening here in remove beer is it accepts beer objects from pipeline and then will try to drink them by removing them, unless you believe it's not critical enough, or unless you tell your body you've had enough beers. Not like I'll be likely to do that ever, but hey, some people might. At the same time, it also supports a different parameter set, specifying a string, which again is permitted from pipeline. So you can just pipe the brand of beer you want to drink, and it will try to drink it. Also, you can use type and container in this instance. What happens beneath the hood? It tries to call getBeer with the parameter specified, passing through the type and container, and for remove beer, it passes through what if and confirm in case they were specified. Using this method to internally call the get command allows you to fairly easily implement both at the same time. Also, on Z commands, try to include the pass-through parameter. So you have the options of keeping working with it after changing something. So let's update all the remaining beers to barrel. And now I've got 2 barrels of beer in our fridge. Okay. Now, there are some things that make Joey sad. Anybody caught up with that meme from PSConf EU?
Yes, yes.
It just keeps on going.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Giving and giving. They won't forget that. And we're already organizing having printed T-shirts for the next PSConf EU.
Well,
with that. Anyway, in this instance, things you really should avoid is interfering with user preferences, like overriding the prompt. Yes, Powershell, I am looking at you. An exchange shall right away as well. Go cry in the corner, be ashamed of yourselves. Console settings like color, width, title. This is really the domain of what the user should be doing, should be choosing for himself. It should be a preference for the user, not for the module. Also, preventing user choice is a bad thing. For example, disabling options, which in some cases might be done, or more often, hard coding colors. Anybody of you ever create a colored menu in order to highlight some things, highlight options, make it easier readable for the user?
No, because right host is evil.
Right host is evil. Now you're knowing more than I do. I think right host is awesome for some things. It's just it's misused.
It's better now after PowerShell 4, right?
Since PowerShell 5 and since it's writing to the information stream, yes, it has improved, but it had a reason for existence even before that. That whole thing, whenever you use right host, God kills a puppy thing that got circulated, was completely taken out of context. The thing is, many beginners confused it with output. So their commands were not reusable with other commands, which was bad. So what they did instead was use right output because, Don Jones told them right host is bad. Now, if I had a send for every single user, for every single instance where mistaken use of right output because they were reporting status and progress report using that, broke a test command, I'd be retiring to my own island nation. In my opinion, write output, switching to write output was more harmful, actually. Because if you're writing status using output in a test command, the test command will always return true, even if it's false. And it also means you need to handle all the strings in your output if you try to reuse the command. But it gives the illusion of working, so the user didn't know. Using red host kills puppy, so we don't use it. Yes, I know. But using red host with hard-coded colors prevents the user from switching the background color, for example. Imagine you had a message that was hard-coded foreground color to red. Now I've got a friend who would not be able to use your module in this instance because he has his background color set to red. Yes, error red. It's his way of telling him you have an elevated prompt, an elevated console, because the default console is black, and if he elevates it as local admin, it will be red. It's his way of notifying him, be careful what you're doing, you might break things, which I think is a neat idea. But if modules hard-code colors without giving the user an option to change them, they prevent the user from either using the module or from using the color, which is a way of preventing user choice.
I've got a question.
Shoot.
Error preference. If I don't know if I've got this straight or not, but I tested this out. If you're doing a try-catch block within your module function and you want to make sure that it catches the errors, error preference needs to be set to stop. And if you set that within the module function, that's okay because error preference is only set within the scope of that module function rather than at the calling level, right?
Exactly. It is
Okay,
absolutely
cool.
safe to do that. And while we're at it, even if you use call a separate module from your module, you're not breaking the module, the command you're calling by that, because if you call a command in a separate module from your module scope is not under the called module scope. So if module A calls a command in module B cannot inherit the variables from module A. So if you use an error preference variable in your module, you're safe. You're not breaking anything with that. There are a very few instances where you need to set a global error preference. There is. Specifically in a few badly coded modules, like let's take the Exchange module or the SharePoint module. There are a few commands that only look at the global scope, and if you want to try catch them, you have to set the global error variable. If you do that, be sure to immediately after you're done, restore it to the value before that. Because otherwise you might be interfering with other commands, which you shouldn't. But other than that, local variables are your thing. They belong to you. Which is, by the way, where we hear with the interfering with other modules things. One of the aspects I really, really hate is if somebody overrides my commands or the commands I use. For example, you could redirect write verbals to point at your personal logging command in your module. That would make it inconvenient for the user because he have to specify allow clobber if he wants to install your module. It also might very well interfere with other modules. So unless your module is specifically designed for this, for doing exactly this action and it communicates that to the user, unless it's doing that, stay away from this, please. It's usually painful.
Ironic that the PowerShell cookbook needs you to do that then.
Yes, and the automated labs did exactly that as well. the cookbook might tell you to redirect it for examples, but if you do this in a resource you publish to the general public, like a module on the gallery, you should try to avoid it.
Totally.
The cookbook probably, I think I've seen the current version, but the last one had a chapter on command preference, like cmdlet versus function versus alias, what is chosen and how do you know what happened. So in that instance, it would show you the effects by having you do it.
Yeah, I think it was just a very specific thing with format hex. It's,
Okay. Yes. Another thing you should really avoid is locking resources, which is more rarely done, but I have had one instance where a log file was specifically locked and kept locked that actually belonged to another module, which was breaking the other module and causing lots of this evil red thing that the user thinks Google has to fix with the next solution. So basically, just be polite to the user in other modules. Yeah, that's the main thing, really. Okay, the need for speed. Love to not wait. When I import a module, I want it to be there. When I run a command, I want the return value as soon as reasonably possible. So in your module, caring about the import time is important. For example, if the less files your module has, the faster it imports, surprisingly. Even if you have the same number of lines of code in it, the less files, the faster, because you're saving on overhead for scanning the file, parsing it, evaluating execution policy, validating certificates, revocation lists, that kind of thing. So that is one of the reasons you often find published modules that only consist of 2 files, the manifest and a PSM1 file. You don't have to cut it that short if it's inconvenient for you, but you should have it as reduced as feasible for maximum speed. I must admit, at that point, I'm still working on that for the Powershell framework and my other modules. DBA tools already does it. For what the difference really means, on an older SQL server, we had a complaint that DBA tools would take 80 seconds to import. 80 seconds for a module import, which was rather inconvenient, and you can imagine the user experience from that. Well, we compiled everything into a single, all the functions, all 389 public functions and 120 internal functions, a bit above 500, into a single file, and gave him the module. We took the import time from 80 seconds to 7 seconds. On a smaller module, you usually don't see the effect as much because you're talking usually about milliseconds or a second difference, not on that scale. But as the number increases, the difference is very, very noticeable. The second part is dot sourcing versus invoking script log. You can dot source a file, or you can read its text with get content, for example, build a script block and invoke the script block. The first one takes longer because at that point, certificate check and execution policy comes in again. The invoking the script block solution is usually faster, but has less debugging information in the messages. So you have to consider what you're going to do. We had that at DBA tools once because somebody could not check the revocation list and had to wait for the 30-second timeout for every single file. And if you have to wait 30 seconds timeout on 1,000 files, well, you can have a meeting or two in the meantime. So having an option to choose between the two makes it convenient for more use cases. Also, for your commands, you should be planning, for example, for caching, information you hold locally. Matthias Jessen has an excellent solution for the caching. A blog post, I think. I don't have the links at hand, sorry. consider what you're going to keep in memory and how you're going to work with that. And very important, measure command is your friend. Look at how long your commands actually take. Let's take a look at what we can do with that. Now for the beer factory module, this is the PSM1 file. I've got one command called import module file that decides whether to dot source the file or to invoke the script block. So what I do at the beginning is determine whether it should dot source. And once this is set as a module level variable, script in a module is module level, module scope, I run the command dot sourced. Notice the dot here, this is important. Otherwise, the commands would be forgotten once the commands loaded, the scripts executed would be forgotten once import module file ends otherwise. By calling a function with a prepended dot, you're calling the function in the current scope. Then I just iterate through it for every single file. Ideally, even if you're reading the text, you should actually be compiling them. This demo module isn't doing that yet. All right. Summarizing the whole thing, really user experience is a game of 1,000 characters. It's really every single step, everything you do matters. So you can have one fatal misstep and modules will, and users will remember that part rather than all the things you did well. For example, I'm fairly sure the Azure module has a lot of good things in there. It's just a few really bad missteps they made, especially where command naming is concerned. Yeah, people remember that. Make it as intuitive to use as possible. The user shouldn't really need the documentation, the full guides to at least get started with the module. But do not skimp on the documentation because at some point the user will need it in order to maintain his solutions, to make the most use of your module. And this is especially important, if you change something in the module, he needs to be able to look it up. Otherwise, he'll be scratching his head, why is this not working anymore? Just did an update, doesn't work anymore. There. All right. Thank you for your attention. Any open questions so far?
I have two questions. Can you explain why is the variable PS script root? Because I've seen it, but I never used it. I'm not sure what it does actually.
Wait a sec. All right. PS script root. What is it? Where do we have it? This one?
Yes.
This is the current folder the file is executed in. What I'm doing here is I'm storing it in a variable. We can get into why soon. You could be using this as a PS script root instead. And what I'm doing is I'm iterating all the items below the current module path. The thing is, as you import the module, your actually current console path, where you are, is not the folder of the module. You could have CD'd to any other directory. You could be in the registry. You could be anywhere. So this is a way that can tell your file, this works for script files and for modules, where it currently is.
Okay.
Where's the file? And as I said, I really use it to scan for subfile folders and files within the module structure to load them.
And there's a difference between PS script root and PS command path. Is it there's two that work off of the current script? Is there?
There should be. Let me see. Let's create a new file here. So So the PS command path is the full file, and the PS script root is the folder you're in. I must admit, I really never used this one. So I had to look that part up.
I didn't even know that one existed.
I encountered it at some point, but it was years ago, and I never had a use case for it.
I tend to sometimes pull the name of the script or the module off to use for building log files, maybe. But I'm not sure how much best practice that is.
But for actually for the module name, there is a separate way to get to access that, and that would be, let's see, the cleanup part. This is the module information of the module you're currently importing. And thank you also for posting that link. Yes, this looks like it's exactly what I'm looking for, what I was referring to on the caching. All right, do you have another question?
Yeah, just how many functions would you recommend in the module, or it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
The thing is, this is really part of chapter 1 of the identity part. Your module needs to have a clear identity. Everything else is irrelevant in that regard. You can have 500 commands that fit that, or you can have 5 commands that fit it, or you can have a single one. Heck, you can even have no commands in your module, and it can still provide value. It really is, as long as the user can handle it, it's great. And how many are reasonable really depends on the benefits it provided, on how clearly you can communicate the different use cases, how efficient users can use get command to discover what they actually need.
Mm-hmm.
I have the personal experience on DBA tools, which is pretty much the biggest one I've ever worked on. With currently, I think we are now up to 390 commands. And it works in that users usually know the commands they need, and the naming is reasonable enough, and the community is active enough that if you have a use case you don't know, you can ask, and the documentation is good, and there are lots of examples.
Okay.
The larger your command base, definitely the more critical it is to have documentation on it.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Just said in the YouTube chat about the PS script root was only introduced in version 3 or 4 of PowerShell. So there you go.
Well, what about in terms of maintainability? And I don't know what the pattern, in terms if you've got a module of that size, because obviously, because if you're in the kind of Java, C# sort of method of developing, you would break everything into separate class files or, sorry, namespaces.
That really depends on how you want to handle it. DBA tools, which is again my yardstick for large in PowerShell, has every single function in a single folder, but every single function in a separate file. We could instead have split it into multiple modules, into more thematic modules, and have one basic infrastructure. You see this, for example, in the VMware PowerCLI module currently. If you run install module PowerCLI, or I think that was the call for the index, you get all the modules installed, but there is one core module dependency that has the core components, that has authentication, for example, and split them up into individual parts. How much you should be doing this really depends on the use case. And in open source projects, I haven't found yet a single case where I said, yes, go and split it. In some corporate environments, I very much have. in many instances, having a shared module, and with that a shared module scope, if you only have a single module, makes it a lot easier to have central resources in the module, like module scope variables that everybody can access without having too much pain. The more you work with C#, for example, the more you have the ability to have that central base dependency. Because once you enter into C#, a lot of the scope dependencies you have to deal with in script modules vanish.
I don't know how we're doing for time.
We are basically at the end of scheduled time as far as I can see. But I don't mind continue.
So there's a couple of other things. I don't know. The only use case for globals is if you shouldn't be using globals pretty much at all unless there's some kind of stuff that you want to persist across your session, like initial connections. And also I've seen it argued that you should be using, and you kind of briefly touched on it, whether should you be using module qualified names when you're calling a command, so db/tool/ when you call your command, and that kind of helps to reduce any kind of command naming conflicts like you mentioned with the get user style problems before.
Yes. Global variables, avoid them wherever you can. No matter what, try to avoid them. Keep them in module scope. If the user runs remove module on your module, he wants to release everything your module is doing. Cluttering global has often the effect of confusing the user because the variable will be in his tab completion. Will have him wondering what's happening there. Your module should try to be a bit of a black box where information is concerned. When I need global resources, I usually go C# and static library, which has the added advantage and disadvantage of being visible from all run spaces at the same time, because that completely moves it outside of the PowerShell scope thing, but also prevents the user from stumbling over them. All right, the other one. What was the other point again? Sorry, I just got too much on that one.
Module qualified names.
Module qualified
so,
names.
db/tool/.
Yes. I generally try to avoid them, not because it would not be technically more precise, but because, in my opinion, it is not worth the price of added maintenance effort and reduced readability. If you module prefix every single command, it's going to add up. In text, it's going to add up. In parsing, you have to do an understanding what's happening there. And God save yourself if somebody renames the module.
Yes, but when you're in an corporate environment where you're dealing with multiple modules, there is some kind of semantics there in that it's giving you an actual indication of in which module those commands are held in.
Actually, what I recommend, especially in corporate environments, and I know this does not work always, especially in large corporate environments, is that you take special care about the prefixes you use of your commands. Because the prefix is basically the module ID in the command. For example, I never have any trouble discovering the AD commands. It's fairly obvious where they are from. Where do we have that? Those are instantly visible for me. If you maintain a strict central module ID, module prefix index for your company, that can avoid that necessity. However, I am fully aware that that really is not practical for every single company out there. If you're a 200,000 employees company that has fused and split off companies over the last 10 or 15 years, you'll have so much legacy code and so many departments not talking with each other that you may not have another choice, yes. Generally, however, I handle that with the dependency. I set my module to have a dependency or several dependencies, and that in most cases covers it. For what do I need from this and where is it likely to come from? Of course, it's problematic if you're just occasionally encountering that module and then have to go and fix it.
No, that's a really good point. And I don't know if it's in the scope of this. Something that's always really confused me is nested modules and what on earth that's about. But maybe that's a different conversation.
Actually, nested modules, right away I can tell you, don't do it, Jim, don't do it. Nested modules are highly problematic, especially since they're invisible for other commands and other modules. Another module might have a different version of the same module as a nested module. Now, if it's a purely script-based module, that may not matter that much. However, if it has a C# component, well, those do not know scopes. You can have one copy of the library in your entire process, and the first one wins. And if they've got different versions, then one of the nested modules will work, the other will not. However, there will be no import error. It will just silently appear to work until you try to use something that doesn't. And you really have no indication of what's happening there. You do not have any external reporting on the version used. While if you've got required modules, dependencies that are publicly very visible, you can specify the minimum version or the exact version you require, at which point you can audit against module use.
And there was one last thing, and apologies if this was already covered. Something that I heard in the past was there was a big performance improvement for using manifest files because it meant that your modules didn't have to be parsed because the PowerShell engine got all the information it needed from the manifest file.
This is absolutely right. And I highly encourage everybody to have a manifest file. And specifically, this, by the way, is a dependency where you can show this is the minimum version specified here. However, the critical part, functions to export, CMDlets to export, and aliases to export must not be wildcarded. Don't ever do this. This is using a wildcard here is a sin against all of your users, because this, again, even if you use a manifest, if there's a wildcard in there, it has to parse the entire module. Historical context, PowerCLI module did not do this when they shifted to module. And on all the PowerShell versions, if you had the module not imported, but just somewhere in a folder that was in the auto import queue, and you try to tab complete, for example, get command. Now at this point, if I hit tab now in that scenario on a PowerShell 3 computer, it would have taken like 30 seconds to complete get command, because it would have to parse 120 megabytes of C# compiled module for commands it would export.
Yikes.
So always use explicitly the commands you try to export in an array. For example, we could do something like this, and that would work. And that is exactly the way I recommend doing it. All of my templates, including my template system, include tests, pester tests, to test for exactly this, whether there is a wildcard in here or whether the list is complete versus your public functions folder. All right. Anything else?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Chris has said on YouTube what he would like to see for required modules, being able to specify the minimum maximum version. A good example is if you depend on the Azure RM functions. At the moment, he has to write custom code for that. So you've got that in there.
I've got this here. This is the required modules list. And you can specify a hash table. Let's add another one. All right, now this module with that change requires a minimum version of 0.9.10.23 of the PS framework and exactly version 1.1 of PS Util. There is no maximum version that I am aware of.
Okay. Well, that answers your questioning, Chris, but he did also ask, out of interest, did you encounter any problems with third-party PowerShell modules using a non-English operating system?
Yes, I have encountered problems. Specifically, commands that require that depended on parsing error messages. Because they, surprisingly would try for, reading the error message in English, but my system was in German, so it would not work.
Right.
I had that in a few rare cases for the version 2, Windows 7 first flight Active Directory module, but that was fixed in an update of the RZ.
Okay.
It has happened rarely. I do know that several open source projects have that problem. I do know that there are still several functions in DBA tools, for example, that require English error messages for some of its error handling. I've had issues for that, but lots of things to still to fix for DBA tools. We're working on that. But quite a few others still maintain that problem, yes.
Okay. I think that's all the questions from... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Excellent. One last thing I just kind of remembered about the concept help. There's a language coded folder. I put it in en-us, which is one of the last default folders. You should always have one of them, even if it's in the same language as the main language you're using. For example, if you have read a module in Spanish and have a Spanish folder with it, and somebody imports your module in a non-Spanish OS, it will not know to look for the Spanish help. It will try looking for an English help. So even if you do not translate it into English, you still should have a Spanish version of it in the English folder, just in case.
So you've got something.
So you've got something, exactly. Like maybe a web link to something Google Translate can translate for you. Or maybe the user is Spanish and actually knows it, just as the OS is not.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, has anybody else got any questions, or are we all done here? YouTube, there's no more questions on YouTube, so if there's anybody else on the call? No? Okay.
Nope.
Well, thank you very much for that. That was actually really interesting. We did go just slightly over time. We're only a couple minutes over. But that was actually excellent. With both speakers tonight were excellent. So thank you very much, Fred, for that. I've learned a lot, and I know the guys on YouTube have, and probably the guys on the call as well. So thank you. As I said, everybody, our next meeting is 30th of May, and I'll be in touch about that, and I'll send out a survey after this as well. So thank you for everybody to join in. Thank you everybody for joining tonight. It's really appreciated, and I will see you at the next meeting.
Thanks very much for your time. Thanks very much for your time, Fred, and answering all the questions.
I had a great time. If you're looking for me, you can find me under the nick Fred in the PowerShell Slack channel. I'm always open for questions.
Oh, and there's the new PowerShell Slack channel now. They've turned the PS Conf one into a European PowerShell Slack channel, or did I miss that at the beginning?
They did turn it into the European channel for values of European. We're still working we're still working on finalizing a concept that is good for everybody. But there is a general PowerShell Slack community out there, which, oh, wait a sec, I'd have to look for it. Which you can sign up on slack.poshcode.org for. You'll find most of the big names in there at some point.
Oh, that's the kind of worldwide one, isn't it?
That's the old one, the channel one, that very, very hyperactive one.
Yeah.
The taking a 15 minutes breaks means you'll probably have to browse upwards to find the end of the conversation you were scanning. Oh,
Yeah.
While we're at it, check out the number of new messages.
Right. Since 8:29 p.m. Okay. That's an hour. Okay. So yeah, lots in there to look at. Okay.
All right.
Right, guys. Thank you very much. I'm going to sign off now. So.
Okay.
Thanks, Fred, for that talk. That was great. I'll catch up with you all
around.
next month. Cheers, then.
This session is no longer